Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Can You Hear Me? I'm Eileen Rochford, CEO of the marketing and strategy firm, The Harbinger Group.
And I'm Rob Johnson, president of Rob Johnson Communications. For professionals like Eileen and me who have clients who judge their success by appearing on earned media like traditional TV, radio, or print, getting them prepped for that engagement can make or break the interview. But each interview is different depending on the realities of that particular outlet.
Like radio, for instance. Since you're heard there and not seen at all, it's okay to have notes in front of you, just as long as you don't sound like you're reading from them, right? I mean, nobody wants to hear that. And the formats on radio, depending on the show, can be very different. Many shows have longer form interviews. They can last as long as 7, 8, 9 minutes. And those are great because they can allow you to really show your personality, comfortably weave in stories, examples. Others, like Newsradio 780 WBBM in Chicago, are typically straight news with much, much shorter segments where getting to the point is paramount.
And speaking of news radio, WBBM, we're honored to welcome, Can You Hear Me, veteran award-winning news anchor Rob Hart. Rob, welcome to the program. We appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you for having me today.
And I do have to say right off the top, it's odd for me to have a podcast with Eileen, and I'm the Rob with the second best voice today. So I'm just going to have to get over it. We're going to plow through. It's going to be awesome. We're looking forward to it.
That's very flattering because every time I hear myself on the radio, I'm like, why do I sound like one of the super fans? To me, it sounds very nasally.
I think you guys are both amazing.
You're doing just fine.
Coming from a total amateur rookie, you guys are great. Okay.
I have voice envy of Rob Hart, but that's beside the point. We're gonna plow through here. So, Rob, for our listeners, why don't you give everybody a little bit of your background so they know how you got to one of the preeminent Chicago radio stations, not only in Chicago but in America?
Well, I started out my journey into broadcasting began at Marquette University, where I was a communications major. It was broadcast and electronic communications back then. I was on the campus radio station. I did some work on the campus TV station. And then in my sophomore year, the executive talk show producer at WTMJ Radio in Milwaukee, it turns out he played racquetball with my broadcasting advisor at Marquette. And he told him, I think we have a couple of openings for a part-time producer / newscaster, someone who would work on the weekends. Do you know of anybody? And my name was at the top of his mental list. And that was the very beginning. My first day on the air in Milwaukee as a professional broadcaster was April 22nd of 2000. And my job was answer the phones during the sports talk show that would lead up to the Brewers or the Bucks. And then I would play the commercials during the Brewers games or the Bucks games. And then we'd go into tape programming afterwards. And we had a 3-minute local news cut in after the network news at the top of the hour. And that was my first entry into big time radio. And the funny thing was back then, you're a sophomore, you're a junior at Marquette, and I would get off the air at 11:30 and then go straight to campus parties where everybody else was. And I thought like I was an astronaut returning from the moon or something like that. It's like, oh, by the way, I was on the radio. And then they would say, oh, where? And I'd say, well, WTMJ, AM 620. It's like, oh, my parents listened to that. And that was the end of all the social cachet that would bring you. But 5 years at WTMJ led to WGN in Chicago. My first day on the air in the city was October 17th of 2005, the day the White Sox won the American League pennant. And that was a heck of a way to start. And from there, it was did an all-new startup. You may remember FM News 101.1 in its 11 glorious months of operation. And then when it went off the air, I was still under contract for another year. And you talk about pivots. I go from doing all news to going down the hall to the Loop. Classic rock. They had a new morning show that was underway. And they said, do you want to give that a shot? And it turns out the host and I had some chemistry. I stayed there until 2015. And from there, it was on to BBM, and I've been there ever since.
That is awesome.
Just a smashing success of a career.
Can I just say 1 second though, your journey though in radio, anybody that's done TV, I mean, I interned and did all that and started in small markets. To start at a powerhouse like TMJ, I mean, because it owns Milwaukee. Everybody, I think nationally who pays attention understands that it's a great brand, radio, television, the Milwaukee Journal. So I'm just saying that was not a normal way to start, and to be like, hey, I'm in college, I'm going to parties. Oh, and I'm also, anchoring the news at WTMJ. That's pretty special.
I was very fortunate because there was my senior year at Marquette. I took what spending money I had and spent it on a used Chevy Blazer, thinking that I needed this big SUV to cart all of my stuff across the country because I'm going to graduate and then start working through small market radio and eventually get to Chicago by the time I turned 30. And I did have a job offer from Dubuque, Iowa, KDTH, AM 1370, the voice of the tri-states. And I would do morning news and agriculture reports. And the news director at TMJ said, what's your goal? And I said, I want to get to Chicago eventually, back to my hometown. And he said, it's a lot faster through Milwaukee than it is through Dubuque. And so that the decision was made right then and there.
That's great advice.
Beautiful.
Oh my gosh. As one Marquette grad to another. Well done.
Well, thank you very much.
And you guys are enjoying a nice year if you're a college basketball fan. I know you guys want to get that in. And what a cool ride. What a cool ride the team's having.
I'm not wearing a Marquette shirt. What are you talking about?
How could you tell?
Yeah, it's a podcast. They can only see it. They can hear us, not see us. But Rob has his nice, he's a good Marquette man with his tie on and everything. So you all are definitely representing the alma mater well.
Darn right. Someday I will interview Shaka Smart.
There you go.
It's my 2024 goal, people. We're going to figure out a way. That man is just the best. Awesome program. Hot off a big win today, so I'm feeling it for sure. And it's funny, Rob, I have a similar, but I'll make it much, much shorter because it's not as interesting, story of being in the Milwaukee market and attending Marquette. Yeah, as a journalism major, made a huge difference because of access to, at the time, the Journal Sentinel, Milwaukee, where I worked as a junior and a senior. And I also worked at the Associated Press here as an undergrad, which led, to my first job too. So it's pretty cool that you go to a school in a market like this with a great connection to the city through all the awesome educators and faculty. And they really do make connections for us. So it's pretty awesome.
And I tell people that, not to turn this into a you should send your kids to Marquette podcast, but...
What? Mine goes there.
But apparently it is.
I do say one of the great things about working in Milwaukee, and given the fact that Marquette is right next to downtown and you have that access to downtown Milwaukee, is that you can do a lot of stuff professionally early on in any discipline. And because I'm part of the mentor program that you mentor students along their way, and we have a lot of wannabe sports guys and a lot of sports gals come my way, and I say, you're in a great place in Milwaukee because you have the Bucks right there, you have the Brewers right down I-94. Things are happening. I mean, one of the ways I earned my spurs in news broadcasting was and is the center of the political universe. I remember there was a Democratic debate in 2004 hosted at Marquette, and one of the moderators was Lester Holt, a guy I had grown up watching on Channel 2, and I was a very terrified 24-year-old going up, Mr. Holt, I just want you to know that I've watched you my entire life. And he couldn't have been more gracious. And the amazing thing was he had his teenage son along for the ride to observe everything. He's like, oh, by the way, this is my son, Stefan, who, of course, now is on Channel 5.
Exactly. That's really cool.
Lester is such a great guy. And I echo everything you say. Yeah, I echo everything you say about them.
Yeah, that's funny. I know when I told my kids that I was on the overnight news desk at the Sentinel the night that Jeffrey Dahmer was apprehended, I waited till they were old enough to know who that was. That was
right. They were old enough to watch the Netflix movie.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when you dropped that particular bomb on them.
Yeah, that was eye-opening. They were like, I'm like, yeah. And you talked about, getting off at 11:30, going to the bars. I had to walk home at 3 a.m. after having, covered the desk that night. That was surreal, shall we say. Okay, now we are here to talk about how Marquette is, how great Marquette is. No, just kidding.
That was such a great intro, by the way. I mean, one of our best, if I may say so, but it also depends on having a great guest. So thank you, Rob. You brought the best of us.
Happy to jerk the wheel from the show.
No, we encouraged the direction. Well, at least I did the direction of that wheel.
Yeah, no, me too.
Okay, so Rob, Hart, let's talk about when an expert or a thought leader is preparing to be on any radio show format, because I think you could probably have some universal tips here. What guidance would you give them? Because you've listened to thousands of people either do really well or maybe not so great over the many years. I want to hear your guidance on what they could do to make as much of a success as they possibly can during that interview.
I would say the first thing is don't panic. I mean, that's good advice in life, but it's especially good in an interview setting because people, when they say, okay, you're going to be on the radio, you're going to be on TV, depending on your mindset, you can think, oh my goodness, hundreds of thousands of people are listening and I'm going to be, this is 60 Minutes. The reporter or the anchor or the broadcaster is coming after me to make me look terrible, and nothing can be further from the truth. If you're on as a thought leader from a interviewer perspective, you are going to get slow, fat ones over the plate over and over and over again. Many opportunities to knock it out of the park, because what we're doing is just giving you a chance to show off what you know. It is a thing that that people fantasize about throughout their life. Just an opportunity to have the floor and talk about what they know. I mean, if you went to a party and somebody said, just tell me about what you do for a living, and then just kept asking you questions about it, you would be thrilled. It's like, I want to hang out with this person because all they do is ask me about my career and the things I know and all of this knowledge that I carry with me that I use to make money, but also just because I'm really passionate and believe in it. And that's what we're doing on the radio. We're giving you an opportunity talk about what you know and fill in the gaps for the rest of us. And I think that is that will help you calm down and help you really understand what you're trying to do as part of the interview. So you're playing on your home court, and we want you to succeed because if you, as the interviewer, tell us what you know, then the show is very informative.
That's great advice. I really like the concept of thinking about it as you're a party guest and you found the nicest person in the room who's going to ask you all the questions that you've always wanted to be asked. So talk away.
and think about, Eileen, from our perspective, as we guide our clients, that's always the thing. It's like the elevator speech, the cocktail party, wherever you are, how can you make a compelling case for yourself without going on for 5 minutes straight where people's eyes will glaze over and that you answer the question in an interesting enough way that it elicits another question. So this falls in line with what we I think, consult our clients on is how do you answer that question? And what Rob's talking about is we're just going to tee you up because we want to hear your subject matter expertise, and the more comfortable you are, the more it's going to come through. Is that right, Rob?
Yeah, that's correct. And of course, if the interviewer is any good, he or she is listening and then will also guide the conversation based on what you're saying. But you should know this as an interviewee, it doesn't necessarily work out that way. Sometimes the interviewer just has like 3, 4, 5 questions and they want to get those questions answered. And that's the end of the segment. They're not going to really kind of listen and respond to what it is you're saying, but the better ones will. And so that is they're going to guide the conversation based on, they're going to listen to you and ask questions based on what you're saying.
Those are the best interviews. Don't come in with a list of questions and then you're like, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. Listen to the answer because it might take you places you weren't counting on going. So, okay, we mentioned off the top, the type of station you're on makes all the difference when it comes to prioritizing your messages and your pacing. So what would you say to guests who need to consider when coming on your station, Newsradio, WBBM, and it's very quick pace with short stories and interviews? We talked about some places where you can answer longer questions, but you're looking for that quick soundbite. So what do people need to think about when they're coming on a place like yours that has a more, quick pace?
Well, I will say this both as a person who's now behind the microphone at BBM, but also who was on the station as a guest when I used to be a reporter in Milwaukee. And I'll give you an example. There was a day in 2005. There was a very big story that ended in Milwaukee, and that was the case of the the person who shot and killed the family of the federal judge. He drove up to Milwaukee. He ended his life there, and we were getting phone calls from all over the country about this. And the two that I fielded, one was from GN and Spike O'Dell. The second one was from BBM and Pat Cassidy and Felicia Middlebrooks. And the first one was Spike, and that was a 7-minute interview. And I thought I was part of the show by the time we were done. It was very chatty, very relaxed, and I just couldn't believe it that I was doing Chicago radio, and just I felt like a part of the gang. I was prepared to do that again on BBM, and that was 90 seconds. And it was basically, I said my name and just kind of explained what happened. And there's like, all right, that's Rob Hart, WTMJ. Thank you. Like, they hustled you off the phone because the formats are different. GN, you can speak at length, or a WLS, or another news talk station at anywhere else in America, but BBM is all news, and it is an ancestor of the all news format that was developed by Westinghouse in 1965. You give us 22 minutes, we give you the world, headlines, boom, boom, boom. So it's a lot faster than a traditional news talk radio show. So when you're on my show, it's 3 minutes. There's one segment that goes for 4. And so the answers to questions, you kind of have to structure it as I would a news story, where the most interesting fact or the insight that you want to get out, or the piece of advice that you want to give out, that's got to be the first thing you say, or close to the first thing you say. And that's how you should probably organize your thoughts when you're going into that situation. A 7-minute news talk radio interview, you can afford to be a little more loosey-goosey. You can do the, hey, how's it going? You can kind of follow the host on tangents. But in that situation where you have a 7-minute interview, that's where preparation comes in, and just having more to say will serve you in segments where you have more time in which to say it.
Very good. So I totally appreciate your point of the contrast in formats, and making the first most important thing that you say, what you start with when you get a real short one, 90 seconds to maybe 3 minutes. But how do you be pithy? How do you get to the point? How do you prepare to be that? Instead of I have a client who loves to say, his son's coach used to tell him, he was a pitcher, throw strikes. Okay, how do I do that? Just kidding.
Thanks for the advice.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of practice, just like how if you are a pitcher and the advice is throw strikes, there's a lot of bullpen sessions involved. And I think in my case, I started doing talk shows or long form type coverage from being a news anchor, where you have, you have 3 minutes, you have 6 minutes, and that's it. That's all your time, and it's scripted in front of you. When I switched over to being a talk show host in 2010, 2011, I had to teach myself how to be pithy, because there were a lot of like long rambling questions where you can kind of, as the listener, just kind of hear where my thought process was going. And if we had to illustrate it, it was like looking at the game board from Candyland, where we're just twisting and turning and going here and there, and not a straight line from A to B. So the one thing I learned that I kind of applied from news writing, which was interesting stuff on top, that helped me become a much punchier broadcaster when it was time to speak off the cuff.
If I could add something to what you just said, because you just nailed it, a really important point, and I'm not trying to turn this on me other than to say I've had that experience coming from TV, and your format and TV's format are very similar in terms of you got to get to it quick, and I have this internal clock, and get to it and don't waste time. And then I started filling in, as I still do from time to time on WLS radio, where it's 7 to 9 minutes, as we're talking about. So I do that on occasion, and I enjoy doing it. But they had to remind me, Rob, quit hurrying, slow down. You don't have to get to it in 20 seconds, because my brain, for all those years on TV, was used to doing that, much like your brain is used to doing that right now where you sit. And all of a sudden they were like, hey, slow it down a little bit. So that's a really good point that you just made.
And again, it's just like, it's one of those things that you learn by doing. I mean, the more you do it, the better you get, the more comfortable you become.
Good advice.
Absolutely. So you touched upon it, and then I just brought it up, but I really want to give people an idea. And you said you really need to prepare when you're on those longer interviews because you've been at all these various stations all over the place. But when you do have that extra time, when you can be more deliberate, how, not only from a prep standpoint, but how are you able to paint that picture when you know I don't have to give this answer in 10 or 15 seconds, I can give it in 30 to 45. I don't encourage anybody to do it in like 3 or 4 minutes because then you don't, and you just kind of bore people to death. But how do you kind of coach people through that painting the picture idea? Hey, you can slow it down a little bit.
Well, I think in this type of situation, where you have more time, you can tell a story to illustrate a point. You can add more background on whatever it is you're talking about. I mean, for example, going back to that day in 2005 when I was on the news talk show explaining, where they found the vehicle, what is, where they found the car in West Allis, Wisconsin. Where is West Allis in reference to downtown Milwaukee compared, how does that, well, what is that? How does that compare to the geography of Chicago? Trying to just provide more grace notes to the information as opposed to just doing basic bullet points and just being more conversational. I mean, I think that is, going back to the cocktail party aspect of it. You have 30 seconds on the elevator to explain what you do, but now we're at the cocktail party, and we have a little more time to have a discussion about what we're doing between the hors d'oeuvres and trips to the wine rack.
Very good.
I love it.
And do you ever encounter folks, I'm sure you have, because I hear this from my clients, who they're asked a question and they freeze and maybe they say, yes, no.
Yeah, don't give that answer.
Because sometimes your brain, just freezes, and we'll get on that in a second, but how do you coach or handle, coach people through or handle situations like that when you have guests who are maybe not giving all the color that you'd hoped they were going to deliver?
Well, I'll tell you how this usually progresses is that we usually have someone who's new on the show. They haven't done this before. And so question 1, question 2 are the yes and no answer because they're just trying to get their footing. And then you try to ask it a different way, or maybe you look on the prep sheet and you see another interesting fact about them and you try to talk about that. And what I have discovered is that, the first 3 questions may be yes or no. And then you're thinking, all right, well, I can wrap them up inside the allotted window. And then question number 4, they're fully relaxed. They're here to talk now. They understand. It took a little while for that to connect in their head, but once it does, you can't get them to stop talking. And then it's like, okay, we got to go now. But so if somebody has a yes or no question, what I've discovered from a guest perspective is that it's usually the first 2. Once they develop a comfort level, then they are the dynamic and interesting person that you know.
That's great.
I would also say too, to add on to that, Rob, as somebody that used to interview people all the time, I put it on myself. If I asked a question and it was yes or no, and they were nervous or whatever the case was, that was my fault. I should be asking what and how that leads them down a pathway of having to expand upon what they're saying as opposed to a yes or no question. So if I ever heard a yes or a no, I thought you can do better, Rob.
Well, that's no, I agree with you completely because that was a real problem I had early on, which was I didn't ask the question. It was kind of like a rambling statement based on what I knew. And then you'd say like, what do you think about that? And you've already said what they were going to say. So my role as an interviewer is to get you to talk. So if we're talking about being pithy, it's the interviewer's job to make sure that the questions are short and punchy. And so the other person feels they have the airspace to answer the question and fill in the gaps. I mean, people are tuning in to hear you as the host, obviously, but they want to hear the information that you're conveying. They want to hear what the guest has to say. They don't want to hear Rob Hart bloviating for 45 seconds and then the guest, the expert, the financial person with all the letters after their name say yes or no. I mean, you have to give the guest the opportunity to demonstrate that they are the expert.
And to your earlier point, preparation well ahead of your interview, as the person answering the questions is going to get you to that comfort level to help you be able to take advantage of the time that you have, whether it's short or long.
And preparation too. And I'll give another example. And this is when I'm a guest on Chicago Tonight. They do that week in review show on Friday nights, and they will send you, the producer will, the packet of all of the things they are talking about on the show. And I read the whole thing, and I make little notes about this. This is the point I'm going to make about this particular subject. This is my thought on some ongoing trial, because it's a slam bang format, and Paris Schutz, who's the host, is going, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And you have to be ready to say something, even though it's like taking an oral exam about what's happening in the city of Chicago. So if you are going to be a guest on a show, know the material backwards and forwards, know your area of expertise, your subject matter backwards and forwards, and maybe make a couple of notes about this is my point on this particular subject. This is, if we're talking about a new report on manufacturing, these are just some little bullet points you want to make sure that you get out while you're talking. I mean, don't sound like you're reading an outline, but just know it's there to refer to in case you're grappling for something to say.
Very good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would also mention that shows like the WBBM News it's got a very consistent format. So as a guest on the show, making sure to listen and learn and pay attention and be prepared, based on kind of the flow of that specific show that you're going to be on. That would certainly help you feel prepared as well and be prepared.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just watch the show, listen to the show, know what you're getting into first. And then you can prepare just based on the vibe of what you're listening to or watching. If it's like a very relaxed conversational show, be prepared for that. If it's short, pithy questions, prepare for that.
Right. Good. Well, let's conclude with the guest who might be a little more anxious, for whom being interviewed period on any media outlet might really, cause them to get hives or, just to kind of get a little worried. What advice would you have for folks like that? What can they do to prepare to kind of calm themselves down and still make great use of the opportunity to be interviewed?
Well, first off, we're all nervous. If you're not nervous, you're unprofessional. I think there is a level of heightened anxiety, heightened awareness before a program begins, even as a broadcaster. I mean, I've been doing this, my first internship was the summer of '99. So I'm going to say I've been doing this for 25 years. And even now at 10:03 on a weekday morning, once that music is going, I still get nervous. And I think you can use that nervous energy to focus. It will make you a better performer. It'll make you a better interview subject. It allows you to organize your thoughts in your head. And just know, question one, question two, once you get those two answers out, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to be in it and you're like, man, this is great. And then you're going to be surprised when it's over. So, use that kind of anticipation, that nervous energy to focus your mind and on what you're going to say, because once you are two answers into the interview, you're going to be relaxed and you can talk all day at that point.
You know what I tell my clients? There's a fine line between I'm nervous and I have adrenaline and I'm so, I can feel it coursing through my veins. There's a very fine line there. You can either lean into I'm nervous and I'm can't swallow and I'm, breaking out into hives or sweating or whatever, or saying, I'm going to embrace this. Because if you don't feel that adrenaline, then you're not a competitor or a performer or whatever the case is. So that's a really great point. But I always tell people there's a fine line between I'm so nervous and man, I got this adrenaline pumping.
No, make it work for you. Make it work for you.
Yeah, I can give you a real edge. All right. I'm going to ask one more thing, which is there anything we didn't cover here, Rob, that you think, based on the subject, our listeners might want to hear or advice you were hoping to be able to impart today?
I mean, I think, you talked about it earlier, and that is if you are nervous and you have a prep sheet in front of you or some notes, don't read the notes. And I've been in those situations where they will send you kind of a background about what they're talking about. And then I'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And then they're clearly clearly reading off of the sheet. So don't do that because you're not doing yourself any favors. I mean, this is part of a practice exercise for you. And as my kids like to say, practice makes better. I guess practice makes perfect is out of vogue in schools. So practice makes better. And so that is the case for reading at a second grade level, and that is the case for talking on the radio. The more you do it, the better you get, and you'll just enjoy speaking extemporaneously. So don't limit yourself by just reading off the prep sheet.
Very good.
These Marquette folks are solid.
Oh, thanks, Rob. You're the best. I meant Hart, just so you know.
I knew, but thank you for clarifying.
Well, this is how we amazed so many people at 19th and Kilbourne way back when.
That's right. 5-star form is to my back right now. You guys can't actually see it, but I am here in the hood. So we are representing well.
Rob, we're so appreciative of your time and your expertise, and it's just an absolute joy having you on today. So thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. And I was very nervous beforehand. So once you get a couple of...
we are very intimidating. I can see why.
And 2 questions in, it was just like we're having this long conversation.
All of a sudden, I just relaxed and I could talk forever.
I got to tell you, the 10-minute preamble, that's as good as we've ever done. So that was awesome. And you were terrific. So thanks again.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. And folks, that's going to do it for another edition of Can You Hear Me? I'm Rob Johnson. We would love to hear from all of you. If you have any thoughts on today's topic or any other topic you'd like for us to cover in future episodes, please reach out to us on social media. And we should tell you, we now have a Can You Hear Me podcast page on LinkedIn.
Yes, we do. So look for that. Well, thanks, everybody. This has been a great show. Again, I extend my gratitude to Rob Hart, fellow Marquette alum, an awesome guest and awesome news radio host. I'm Eileen Rochford. We thank you guys for listening. If you loved this show, I have a request. Would you please consider giving us a review on any of those platforms where you can find Can You Hear Me? Everything. Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, you know the drill. Please give us a shout out in a review. It certainly helps other good folks find our show. And we appreciate all of you for listening. Thank you. Take care.